Hey YouTubies, as promised, I am coming back to you, and today's video is going to be about a question that I got asked. In the introduction video, I mentioned that I had moved from Detroit to Arizona, from Arizona to Chicago, from Chicago back to Detroit, from Detroit back to Arizona, from Arizona to Georgia, from Georgia to Florida, where I currently live now. And I got a question from a watcher, a subscriber, who wanted to know, how could they go about moving and how to step out of your comfort zone of where you are when you're really ready to go. And let me tell you this, girl, it is time for you to move. And I don't say that knowing your personal situation, knowing what's going on, but I will tell you this. If you feel in your spirit, if you feel that the place where you are is no longer where you want to be, you need to go. And you can do that. You can definitely do that. Lance, my better half, well, I wouldn't say my better, well, neither half is better, I should say, but my love, Lance, he and I share the same type of philosophy as it relates to moving, or moving around. We have no fear in picking up and going and moving to a new city where we may not know anyone, where we may not have a job right then. It's a new place. We have no fear in doing that, and you can be fearless in doing it too. It's just it may require it will require some planning, and it does require just stepping out of your comfort zone. So I'm prepared. I'm going to make some cards. So the first thing you want to do when you're ready to move is plan. All right. Now I'm going to talk about the very first time that I moved to Arizona, and then when I moved from Georgia to Florida, because those are actually kind of two separate times. Now, the first time I moved to Arizona, I told you I just up and went. My boyfriend at the time called and said, "How would you like Arizona?" I said, "I would love to go." He came back 3 weeks later, we were gone. Now, the things that we kind of put in place to allow that to happen was as such. Number one, I did have a job. The job in which that I had, I did have some emotional attachment to. However, I was ready to go. So at that time, what I did was I saved my last few paychecks that I had. I believe just maybe 1 month's worth. So that's 2 paychecks if you get paid bi-weekly. So that was about 2 paychecks, which normally would have went to Christmas. So I saved those paychecks. And I also knew ahead of time that I had 401k monies that I would be able to cash out. Now, I do not recommend cashing out your 401, your 401k, 403b, whatever you have for retirement. If you have been on your job for a substantial amount of time and you have a substantial amount of money put into your retirement, I do not advise you to cash out that money. Simply because with the way things are going now in Washington, you will need that money more often than not, because Social Security is not adequate. And I know that because I work in the housing industry. It is not adequate for you to live just an everyday life, or live life as you are currently living. You will need that retirement money. I didn't have very much vested anyhow, therefore it was in my best interest. I would be able to start over, so I thought. So, and then when I left then in 2005 or 2006, the market was way up, okay? Way up. We're talking still, we're at the tail end of the housing boom. So, that was that thing. So I saved up 1 month's checks. I knew I had my 401k. I knew I had that money coming. Now, you could also plan this around income tax time. If you get a nice income tax check, plan it around that time, because you could use that money to go. And the way that I determined how much money I actually needed to have was I started looking out into the market. So if you have a home that you're going to be selling, you can maybe anticipate some of those proceeds. If you want to sell your house early, then you can do that and use some of that money either to buy a new house where you are, or to maybe use for rent a couple of months or a year or so in order to get back on your feet where you're going to be. Trust me, it's not that scary. So what I did was I went ahead and I looked into, since I work in the housing industry, I knew, you know, I go to forrent.com. Rentalhouses.com is a great place. They do apartments and houses, and you get an idea of what the rent is, so you know ahead of time how much money you need to have a month, or at least that first month or so. You plan that ahead. I mean, you kind of already know how much you need to eat. If it's just you, great. But if it's you and you have children, then you need to know about how much you need to spend a month, you know, on food costs. Now, when we got to Arizona, we stayed in a hotel. We stayed in a hotel for a week. I had already had the apartment online. We had already submitted the application and been approved. I did all of that in Detroit. You can call and get apartment applications ahead of time, even while you're still working, which is a great thing to do. You can pay the application fee and the deposit and maybe first month's rent. That way when you get there, you don't have that burden. But you can do that. We stayed in a hotel room for a week, and then we transitioned into the apartment. I had brought things that I, just had around our house. We got mattresses, like blow up mattresses and things like that, until we got working and got beds, which wasn't very long, a month or so after we moved there. So I mean, it's guerrilla style, at some point, unless you do my second option, but we'll get to there. So that was pretty much get in your car, load it up, and go. We didn't have family there. I think my ex, he had a friend there who lived way on the other side of the valley. That was, that was that. Once we got there, jobs were plentiful. Now, the one thing that I will say, which will lead me to my next card, is no. No what? Know what kind of work you do. I worked as a housing professional. I worked specifically in property management. I had been in property management at that time for the past 6 years. Now it's 13 years. Property management is one of those industries where I can go absolutely anywhere and get a job. I worked in the affordable housing sector, which is a little bit different from the market sector, or just conventional housing, as they call it. And it's even different from real estate per se, like selling houses. It's even different from that. However, in property management, you're always going to have an apartment somewhere, you're always going to have a housing authority somewhere, and there's always going to be jobs. So ironically, I didn't do that when I first got to Arizona, but I definitely could have. I just wanted a break from that. So know what type of work that you do and start looking for jobs. Indeed.com is a great place to look. Monster.com is a great place to start, and CareerBuilder.com is a great place to start. start putting your resume on those sites, because if you have the kind of job where recruiters will see it, they'll start calling you. So another tip is, if you have a relative in the area where you're thinking about going, like for instance, I have a grandmother that lives here in Florida, my mom lives in Georgia, my sister lives in North Carolina, I have a friend now who lives in the DC Tri-City area. Use their address. Ask them, can you use their address to put on your resume? Because oftentimes employers will not pull a resume if it's from out of state. Now, back in 2006, they would. But however, with this economy, they probably won't. So know what kind of work you do and start looking. And you can start this, you know, months ahead. So that's what you should do. The second time that I moved to Arizona, I knew that I was going in July. I set a date firm. It's going to be in July, and I started planning accordingly. So my income tax money got saved. All my paychecks were getting saved. So I was living on the bare minimum. I started looking for jobs. I had a friend who lived there. I linked up with him, asked him could I stay. You know, he had a 5-bedroom house. Can I stay in one of your rooms? That was fine, you know. So I had all of that in place ahead of time. So know what kind of work you do, and start looking ahead of time for jobs. When I moved from Georgia down to Florida, and when I moved from Arizona to Georgia to my mom's, I moved my whole house. So all of my stuff, all my furniture, all my beds, all that stuff, I did that. I've done that twice. Now, in order to move your things, there are a couple of companies that facilitate that. Now, either you can drive a U-Haul truck, which I would say, if you're planning to do that, you probably, if you're moving your things, let's see, I moved I would say about a 2-bedroom house, or a 2-bedroom house or an apartment, maybe 1,500 square feet, 2,000 square feet, something like that. I would say it's going to run you about $2,100 to get your stuff there. Now, I was not game for driving a U-Haul from Arizona to Georgia. I just wasn't. It was only me and my son, so I drove my car and my 2 dogs. But there are companies who will move your things. There are freight companies. There is moving.com is a website where you can look for quotes or bids on moving your stuff, you know, across country or across the state lines. Now, if you're going within the state, awesome. And that's a great thing too. You don't have to go across the country like I did or halfway back. Just move within the state. Especially if you live in a big state, you know. So if you're going from Houston to Dallas, or in my case, maybe from Tampa to Miami, you know, in California from Los Angeles to Sacramento, you know, something like that. If you're moving in state, that's great. Usually places like 2 Minute Truck can get that done for you. And I used a company called U-Pack. It's would you be quiet? Hold on. Get in the bed. I think they start barking because they hear me talking, and it made me think I'm talking to myself or something like that, so they start barking. ABF.com is the company that has a service called U-Pack. And I think you can either do ABF.com or UPack.com. You get those pods. And they do have a company called Pods. Pods is usually a little bit more expensive because, and they're a little bit smaller. Because they actually take that pod, they put that pod on the truck, and then they put that pod, like they store it for you until, you know, if you don't come get your things immediately or you don't need them immediately, they can store it for you. With ABF, they're strictly a freight company, so it's a little bit more risk involved. However, you pack the pod yourself. They generally do not deliver it to your house. Now they can, but that's an additional cost. Me, I just rented a U-Haul and drove my stuff to the actual pod at the freight deck, at the freight place. And then I packed the pods there. I usually get 2. And I think that ran me like $1,700. And a U-Haul truck is $19.95, you know, for 4 hours. As long as you get a big enough truck to take all your stuff in one trip, then you're fine. And then you need someone on the other end to help you unpack, unload the truck, and then load the pods. And then those pods are carried via the truck, and they're not potted on the truck. Now I've seen some that were like that, but usually they're inside the actual back of the truck, where you can't, if you're driving next to it, you can't say, oh, look at those pods. It's usually not like that. And then it arrives on the other end. You make arrangements to pick up your things, and boom, you're done. Or you could do the U-Haul version where you drive your things or have someone help you drive. I didn't have that option, so I always opted to go with the pods. The last time that I moved, I went with a freight company. I don't remember the name of it, but I'm sure I found it on moving.com. And read reviews. Make sure you read reviews of these companies. And a big 18-wheeler truck pull up outside of my house. We packed the truck. I got 10 feet of space, and it's barricaded off. So you get 10 feet of that actual long trailer, and you pack your things in there. And according to how much space you use is how much they charge you. So, and I think they go like by the foot. Get in the bed. So I used that the last time. So know ahead of time what kind of work you do. Know the exact date, or know a tentative date that you want to make this happen, and just begin planning. Start writing things down. Write out your plan. And for those of you that are Christians, the Bible says write it down and make it plain. That's a universal law for me. That's universal, because when you can see something, you can actually see it all the way through. You can see the vision all the way through when you see it on paper. That's why mission statements and vision statements are so important to businesses, because it keeps you on task for what you're trying to accomplish. So, she keeps creeping out so she can look out the door. Get in the bed. I would say write down what you want to do. Write down your budget. Write down what kind of place you want to live in. Because if you want to live, in a nicer upscale place, and you need a budget for that. You need to write down your budget. Start looking for jobs ahead of time. And if you don't have an address, then I would say save up enough money to go there and use an address. Or, if you can make a short trip there, that's another option. Take a trip there. Check it out, see how things are going, see if you like the area, check out the different areas around town, and maybe open a UPS box. I wouldn't do a post office box. I would do a UPS box, because then you get a physical address, and that's what you want, the physical address. So you can open up a box there and use that address on your resume so that you have a local address. And let's see, one more card. When you're doing this, you cannot have fear. No fear. Because fear will prevent you from doing what it is you need to do. Fear will inject its poison into your plan. It'll always give you excuses for why you can't do this or why you can't do that. It'll always keep you stuck, stagnant right where you are. You have to be willing to step out of your comfort zone, and as they say, step out on faith, and know that you got this, especially if you're good at what you do. I've never moved anywhere where I felt like I would not get a job. I always, even in Atlanta, I got to Atlanta and it was deadlock. I mean, there was nothing. I applied and I applied, and even for housing jobs, the market was just tight. And in Atlanta, it's hard because they look for where you live, specifically in the different suburbs. So if you live in Covington and the job is in what's the city way north? I can't think of it. But one of the suburbs way north, you know, they generally probably will look over you, or they, you know, they want to know if you're planning to move there, or something like that, because the commute in Atlanta is very, very, very strenuous. So, you know, they would prefer for you to live somewhere close, because then it's, you know, less performance issues as it relates to traffic and just, you know, overall work-life balance. So, but I didn't let that deter me. Once I got there and just saw how tight the market was, I gave myself a timeline. All right, if I don't have something by January 1st, I'll start looking in Florida. I'll start looking in Augusta. I'll start looking in North Carolina. And that's what I told myself. I'll look in Tennessee. And that's what I did. I looked in Florida. The very first 2 jobs that I applied for, I got hits on. So you can't be afraid. So I would say, you know, where you are, start where you are now and test the waters. Test them out. I mean, someone may call you for an interview. You don't have to take the interview, but just test the waters, test out the market to see where you are or to see where you fall. Make sure your resume is on point. And since I'm not working, I can help you with that again. If you go to facebook.com, it's Angel Consulting Services. I'll be willing to help you with resumes, or give you advice or tips on how to strengthen your resume. Or don't trust me at all. Go to the library and get a book on how to write a good resume. Those are free and you can write it. Usually they have samples. You can write it right from there. I got one to write a federal resume. I wrote a 10-page federal resume based upon the book that I first rented one from the library. I borrowed it, and then I took that one back and went and bought one that was a little bit more up to date. And it allowed me to write a 10-page federal resume. And I shopped it. I threw it out there to test the waters, just to see. I'm not ready for that type of job or that type of move. Or I wasn't at the time. I am now. I wasn't at the time. But I wasn't ready for that. But I threw it out there to see if I get any bites. And sure enough, I did. I didn't go all the way to the selecting or to the hiring point, but I did get the nibble that I was looking for. So just a few tweaks there. I think I'll be on and popping when it's time for me to really shop my resume. So those are those points. I hope that this gave you some insight to what you can do when it comes time to just getting out there and moving. I would say plan. Know what you do. Know what you do. Know your works. Know what you like. Know where you want to live. Know where you're going. And don't have any fear. So with that said, YouTubies, I am out. Thank you for watching. Thank you for all the comments and new subscribers. I'll be back with another video soon on education. Talk to you later. Peace.